Okay, it's almost 11:21 Colorado time. See? I'm wearing my annual Columbine High School t-shirt. Welcome to Trauma Survivor Cynthia. Today is 23 years since the shooting at Columbine High School. The one way I could come up with to honor my stepdad's memory is to read a chapter out of our family book. I do have a playlist titled Columbine Bedtime Stories, which is where you can find the other couple chapters that I have read. How are you? I haven't done a live stream in 2 years, so it might be a little bit rough. First one is say happy birthday in heaven to my grandma Dorothy. She would be 93 years old today. The day of the shooting, Grandma turned 70 years old, and Dave was kind enough to give her $71 bills as a birthday gift because my grandma loved to go gamble in Central City, Colorado. So welcome to my new friends. Subscribers, I call you friends because I get to know you a little bit. I'll show you the front of our family book. I took this photo on the back of the book on my mom's back porch. It's my mom, Linda, and Marilyn Saltzman. She worked for Jefferson County Schools when my mom met her. A moment of silence for the students that lost their lives that day, and a moment of silence for the injured students that day. I believe there was 24 kids that were injured that day. I feel it's important that we acknowledge them because they're just as important because they survived and they're still surviving. And I think their courage is very incredible to watch. I'm reading chapter 5, The Athlete. Very proud. It starts out with Myrna Harden, who is the wife of Al Harden, Dave's coach in high school, who was an inspiration and a mentor to him. And I had the honor and the privilege of meeting Al Harden, his son Rodney, and Myrna. This chapter starts out, "Get in here, Myrna," Harden shouted to her husband from the living room of their Indiana home, where she turned on the television in mid-afternoon on April 20th, 1999. She and husband Al, a retired basketball coach, had just enjoyed a late lunch, and for some reason, Myrna decided to watch TV. "You won't believe this," Myrna said, shaking her head. When Al arrived in the living room, he saw a screen filled with chaos in front of a high school. There were students running and police everywhere. The reporters were talking about bombs and guns. "It's Columbine," Myrna cried with alarm. "What about Columbine?" "Don't you remember you helped get a job at Columbine? You helped Sanders," Myrna responded. His face lost all color. Al rushed to the phone to call Dave's home in Littleton, Colorado. Dave's nephew answered the phone. "We have no news. We haven't heard from Dave yet," the young man told the concerned coach. A few days later, Coach Al Harden was flying to Denver for the funeral of one of his all-time favorite students. Sorry, a picture just fell out of the book. Can't lose that, right? Al Harden, the first basketball coach of the brand new Fountain Central High School in Petersburg, Indiana, in 1969, saw something special in the young Dave Sanders. Even in Indiana, where basketball is king, Dave showed a love of the game and a dedication to excellence that was unique in a high school student. Al and Dave remained friends over the years, but as with most long-distance friendships, their contact became less frequent. So when Myrna made the unusual gesture of turning on the television in the living room that awful day, Al didn't immediately grasp what made her scream. Al and Dave first met in 1969 when Al was a 25-year-old basketball coach and Dave was a senior player at Fountain Central High School, a 500-student junior-senior high school that educated students from 5 small Indiana communities. The basketball team wasn't very good that year. In fact, their record was one of the worst the coach had experienced, 12 wins and 11 losses. But still, Al saw exceptional promise in the senior guard, Dave Sanders. Dave was a workaholic, and athletics was in his blood. He always gave more than 100% to the game. I told him how to improve his technique, and Dave immediately learned the new skill, Al said. A 6'1" guard, Dave was a good player, consistent, dependable, the tall, lanky athlete who ran cross-country and starred in the school play. A popular student, Dave's friends remember his willingness to help others. People liked being around him. Friend Mike Thompson said he helped people. In their small town with only a general store, Dave and his friends, Mike Thompson and Greg Leidy, played basketball, watched basketball and baseball games on television, and went to the drive-in movies. Dave had learned to be independent at an early age, since his father had died of a heart attack when Dave was only 3 years old. His mother, Elsia, worked numerous jobs while raising her 5 children. Wow. Sons Don, Keith, and baby Dave, and daughters Claudia and Susan, his siblings. How's everybody doing? Thank you so much for watching today. It warms my heart. Often Dave's sisters watched over him, and Claudia remembers Dave as a toddler on a rope swing in the yard. He would sequel with delight, higher and higher. He loved Little League baseball in Southern Illinois, where he was born, and his sisters washed his sisters washed his ball uniforms 1,000 times. He had a suitcase filled with his baseball card collection, which he told his students about years later. I probably could be a millionaire from those cards if my siblings hadn't gotten rid of them. Dave laughed. The sound of the bouncing basketball on the porch and sidewalk is a sound I will always associate with David, my little brother. With the burr haircut and the sweaty little body, he was always working and practicing, Claudia said. David had time on his hands because he could have made a lot of negative choices. Because his life wasn't perfect, he could have been angry and bitter, and so many of the youth today tend to be. Instead, he chose to take his God-given athletic talents and put them to use, Claudia said, his sister. Dave's constant practice paid off. Coach Harden saw Dave's potential, and he wanted to help Dave go to college. He knew the family couldn't afford higher education, so he pursued scholarship opportunities with his college contacts. That's sweet. It was a warm spring day in 1969 when Coach Al Harden went to visit Elsia Sanders. Al, Elsia, and Dave sat on the front porch of the modest Sanders home in Newtown, Indiana, a small town of $600. Your son is a good basketball player, and I can get him a 2-year scholarship at Nebraska Western Junior College, Al Hardin told Elsia. Mr. Hardin, do you have any sons? She asked. Yes, I do, Al replied. Would you let your son go to Nebraska? It's a long way from Indiana. Mrs. Sanders, I have confidence in Dave and in the coach. I think he'll do well there. Al reassured her, and it's a free education for 2 years. If you think I should send my son there, I'll leave it up to him, Elsia, Dave's mother, replied. So Dave Sanders left his childhood home and headed to Nebraska to play basketball and pursue his education. Dave was one of 9 players whom Al helped get a scholarship during his 5 years of coaching at Fountain High School. On the first day at Nebraska Western College in Scottsbluff, Dave was hanging out with the other basketball players. Most of them were African American athletes from Kentucky, who were 6'3" or taller. For the first time in his life, Dave appeared short in comparison. He was taller than me. The freshman basketball players had arrived at school before the rest of the student body. The only other students on campus were the young women enrolled in the nursing program. On that first day, Dave met Kathy Moreland, a petite student nurse with brown hair, brown eyes. In their co-ed dorm, the boys lived on the first floor and the girls on the second and third. He was this tall, good-looking basketball player, Kathy said, and she was immediately attracted to him. The two began going out together. Kathy enjoyed his sense of humor and how others were drawn to him. 4 of his high school girlfriends were still writing to him, but he and Kathy clicked. They married in 1972 as Kathy was finishing her nurse's training, and Dave was at Chadron State College, where he had transferred to complete his undergraduate degree. While he was in school in Nebraska, his sister Claudia came to visit. Where are all the cowboys? She asked. Well, little lady, we might find a few at the cattle auction. Dave drawled, smiling. I can imagine the smile on his face saying that. Actually, Dave had always been fond of cowboys, and when he was a child, he received a Davy Crockett coonskin as a gift. He was wild about that hat. He went around singing Davy, Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier, Claudia recalled. By the end of college, Dave still hadn't decided on his career path. He talked about going into the insurance business, but Kathy didn't think it was a very good fit. Finally, Dave called his old coach, Al Hardin, for some career guidance. Al had moved to Colorado and was coaching at the University of Denver. He encouraged Dave to get his teaching certificate and become a teacher and a coach. So Dave stayed in school for another year, acquiring his teaching license. Then he again called Al. Coach, I wish you could help me. I have spring break and I wonder if I could come to Denver and visit. I would love to get a job in the Denver area, Dave said. I have 2 friends who are coaches and I think I could get you interviews. Come next week and stay with us, Al said. With Al's references, Dave got interviews at 2 Jefferson County high schools that had just opened in 1973, Columbine and Green Mountain High School. Jay Stewart and Liz Tadlock, the 2 business teachers at Columbine, interviewed Dave along with a number of other candidates. He had no teaching experience and he was very young, but he was so enthusiastic about teaching, and you could tell he generally liked kids. So offered him a job, Jay remembered. I gotta change positions, sorry. Okay. Offered jobs at both schools, Dave accepted the position at Columbine because he could teach business and coach there. Dave's 25-year teaching career at Columbine High School began in the fall of 1974. In addition, Dave had scouted for Al at the University of Wyoming and Colorado State University. When Dave started teaching at Columbine, the community was semi-rural and many homes were on large, horse property lots surrounded by acres of vacant land. In fact, the first semester the school was open, the road in front of it was still dirt. It was finally paved in the spring of 1974, shortly before Dave had joined the staff. Kathy and Dave lived in the Columbine area in a fourplex, and one of his star players lived upstairs. In 1975, Kathy was pregnant, and Dave was frequently gone for practice and games. So the athlete's father regularly checked in on Kathy to make sure she was doing all right. Dave was married to his job. I can agree with that. I remember sitting at the district finals 9 months pregnant while he was coaching. I went into labor 3 hours later, Kathy said. Daughter Angela was born March 5th, 1976. Love to my stepsister Angela. If you're watching, I love you very much. Wow, his role model was Al Harden. We'd go over to their house for the holidays and end up in the driveway shooting baskets, Kathy remembered. He said if he could touch just one student the way Al Harden had touched him, he would feel like he was successful. Linda said, my mom. Wow. There was a lot of Coach Harden in what Dave became later in life. While Dave talked about moving on to coach at the college level, he was comfortable at Columbine and loved his students, Kathy said. He could remember every play that happened in a game after a basketball game. All the coaches and their wives would go to somebody's house and the guys would go over every play. The women would just sit there and chuckle, Kathy recalled. Our social life revolved around high school sports. One time Kathy and Dave were hosting a pre-Christmas party and her dad had sent some Rocky Mountain oysters from Nebraska, which she deep fried. All of the Columbine coaches were invited, and they loved practical jokes. Rich Long, a fellow coach, tried to scare off all the guests at the door, telling them that Rocky Mountain oysters were the only food they were serving that night, Kathy called. Rocky Mountain oysters, which are bull, can I say testicles on YouTube, are delicacies, but not every coach appreciated. Kathy and Dave also hosted a number of barbecues at their home, but school always came first. We'd be hosting a barbecue and one of his students would call him and he'd be right there for them. Dave was compassionate. He really liked being involved in the lives of his students, Kathy said. Kathy and Dave separated in 1979 and shared custody of their daughter, Angela. They grew apart the years after their divorce, but reestablished a friendship in 1995 when their grandson, Austin, was born. Rest in peace, Austin. David Sanders. My nephew, Austin, passed away of leukemia at the age of 20, I believe. We both enjoyed Austin, and Dave was looking forward to teaching him about basketball, Kathy said. It didn't surprise me at all what he did at Columbine on April 20th. He would go wherever he could to help kids. If something needed to be taken care of, he went and took care of it, Kathy said. And that's the end of the chapter, The Athlete. I'll show you pictures in the book. This is Dave. And right here, coaching photos. I'll just continue to show you the pictures. This is the childhood home he grew up in. That's my mom, Linda, standing in front of the house. I believe it's Newtown, Indiana. This is the wedding day photo. And my sisters and I were witnesses the day they got married. This is my mom, Angela, and Dave. This is a coaching photo that's very popular. I don't know if that reads backwards. My son, Tyler. Down here is Mallory, Tiffany, and Tyler. There's Angela. Good morning. And Austin and Dave. And this is Dave on a slip and slide, showing the grandchildren how to use it. Right here is Al Harden, who I met at the All-Stars basketball game at Fountain Central in 2001. Me and his son Rodney. And there's Angela. Last pictures. This is me. This book was written in 2004 with my kids. And then, yes, I'm doing a live stream for today. I'll be right there.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. My neighbor wondering if I'm home. Every year does get easier. I don't cry as much. I don't have nightmares anymore. I don't wake up every day thinking about Columbine. This is the last shirt I have that he actually wore. You've seen it in my videos in the past anniversaries. And yeah, it's see-through, but it's the only shirt I have left that he actually wore. I'll show this right here. I'll show this picture one more time. I believe the young lady is Jody Reeves, who is a softball player. And Rick Bath, who's a coach, right here. And the other person is Mike Baldwin. This was taken in 1995 Summer Softball Rebels. A message I want you to come away from is to live every day to the fullest, because you truly don't know if it's your last. Don't take life for granted. We only get one. Love your family members. Tell them you love them. Love yourself. That's most important. And 23 years of outpatient mental health therapy has done wonderful for me. I don't have nightmares anymore, which is a big deal. I don't wake up every morning thinking about Columbine anymore. I think of other positive things and living for the day in mindfulness. And I'm very proud to talk about my stepdad. And if my grandchildren are watching this someday, Nana loves you so much. So much. Kylie, Liam, Braylon, my 3 grandbabies. I love you, and I hope you watch this and are proud to be in our family. I want to thank my husband Art for his emotional support. I only have one bad week a year, really, and it's this week. The rest of the year I do pretty good. So if you want to subscribe, that would be great. I don't tell people you have to because I'm not a narcissist that tells people what to do. Like, comment, share if you have any questions. Drop them in the comments below. I'm going to add this video to the playlist titled Columbine Bedtime Stories. Take a deep breath. Hope you enjoy your day. Remember the victims of Columbine. And thank you for watching Trauma Survivor, Cynthia. Thank you.